Right, thanks for that little bit of excitement. We're going to go on to transport reform, which we are doing. And we are definitely doing transport reform, and we're doing it big time. And this is our first key decision as part of the transport reform. It's going to be passed by the end of the month, I've been told. So we're getting this approved now to let staff get on with the work. Council has resolved this on the 31st of March and had the chance for changes, and they're still coming a bit. Councillor Baker, I'm going to move this. Would you like to second this, Councillor Baker, if you're paying attention? Second this one. Thank you. I was going to talk to you a bit as a person. This is a big document. It's very good, but it's not quite perfect. We've got to get on with it. And I'd like to support this with the ability to have a little bit more chance to sort of tidy up a few little bits there that don't quite come across as strongly as they should. These sort of documents get prepared in a certain type of language, and they all look pretty good until you work through them. And we had a document like this for the City Rail Link, which hasn't worked all that well. There's a couple of bits in here that aren't quite strong enough in my view. Is it's got to seem different to staff and the public from day one. It's not quite hammered home enough. And standardisation is absolutely central. And so it does mention that, but we've got to upgrade all standards, and this has to be compulsory. And the last bit is that there's a lot here about responsibility and accountability, but it seems as though the people who are going to be responsible and accountable are us. One of the problems at AT is that you can never find who's responsible for doing something. And so the staff have to be obviously responsible. Whoever's in charge of something has to be blooming well responsible. And so I think we're going to have it slightly changed so that there is the ability to do, it's all here, but it's just a little bit of wordsmithing and work required before it becomes a public document. And I think the Chief Executive is quite happy with this, if I understand it, and I'd like him to talk about that. But hopefully we can pass this with the ability of the Chief Executive, myself and Baker, we often have a little bit of editorialising in some of our other things. I want to get on with it. I'm not going to change the substance of it, but just highlight those little bits and pieces there that staff, not just us, have to be responsible and accountable. Staff have to be responsible and accountable as well. That's a bit of a drawback. I think we all want to see that this works. If there was a burning platform in the election, it was definitely, this is what the public want. No question about that. Okay. Well, Chief Executive, just say something a little bit about it.
Yeah, look, well, just to note, I'm very comfortable that we refine the document a little bit further, that we've got, as we quite often do, have a process for some editorial changes with input from the chair of the relevant committee and the mayor. So, you know, that's all good. I am unashamedly asking for your support to sign this off today. We have a truckload of work to do in this space, and momentum is really important. I would commend it to you as a sensible bit of direction and framing of the change. But we're right in the thick of this now, and looking for your support to keep the momentum up. But I don't want to cut across Steve and Toby and so on. So.
Okay, Toby, over to you and your team.
Sorry, as the Chief Executive said, we're at a really exciting time as we create the two organisations that will support the communities, that will support the elected members, and also deliver great outcomes for Aucklanders, as the Mayor has mentioned. So this strategy and reform, it's more than just transport functions. It's about how Auckland Council and the new Transport CCO are structured and work together for Aucklanders. It's definitely going to be a new way of working, as the Mayor talked about. It's about being closer, it's about being more integrated in terms of the work that we do, and it's going to be community focused. We will be different, we'll be stronger together, we will ensure delivery excellence that shapes Auckland's transport's future. So by approving this today, it means that we can get on with it and we can get it done. So as I say, today is a big milestone, and we're really excited about getting this document over the line.
Thanks, Steve. Just one or two things from me, and then we're really happy to take questions on the report, and we'll just treat it as read. I'll just also introduce to my right Craig Renshaw, who's the head of the Project Management Office inside the Joint Council and Auckland Transport Transition Program team. So Craig and I have probably run point on the content of the transition strategy, so happy to get into any more detailed questions when that comes. So just a quick reminder, the transition strategy itself will be a requirement when the legislation does go through, and the latest that we have on that is we expect it towards the end of April and commencement shortly afterwards. So it's a requirement that the governing body approve this strategic component that sets out the pathway from the current state to the future state, and so that's what we've been working with you on and are bringing to you today for your approval. As an overview, it provides that pathway from here to there. It talks to the transfer of powers to the governing body and to local boards and the functions to council, and it sets out the council's program approach to delivering that change, and it names the decisions that elected members will be presented with throughout the transition period. So really the transition strategy is how will we spend the next 6 months delivering the change, and then it also looks to post-implementation, what does a post-implementation period cover, including we have in there a 1-year review, and then required by the legislation a 5-year review of the new arrangements and support structures. The document starts with the objectives that the governing body set as the Budget Committee last year, and discusses the benefits that will be delivered through the transition period. It describes the design outcomes, so we have to make a reorganisation of Auckland Transport into a focused public transport CCO, and we need to integrate those important non-public transport functions into council. And the document sets out what we're trying to achieve, both structurally and in our way of working, our operating model, and getting to some of that closer ways of working with the CCO that Steve just mentioned. It also covers the scope of the program, how we'll measure our activity, sort of project management principles, which we're happy to talk to as well. And so collectively, it becomes our roadmap, as I say, in detail for the next 6 months, and then beyond in terms of the post-implementation, really making the new structure work for the council's objectives. We had a workshop, members will remember, mid-March, and then we shared the transport transition strategy and draft at the end of March, including with Haukura. And just to mention, we appreciate Haukura's feedback as well, and made some changes in the transition strategy to reflect that. And we also shared with the local board chairs and had some feedback there as well. So really that's it. The next steps, if we have the transition strategy approved here today, that really sets us up for success. We're able to report against this. You'll see reporting back against the progress of the transition strategy through that period. And work is actually underway. As Councillor Baker mentioned on the last item, he and Councillor Henderson have been attending local board workshops for the Auckland Road Classification Framework, which is already underway, working with local boards to get their feedback on that framework. And soon, towards the end of April, early May, we will be sharing a proposal with staff for the new proposed structure, and working through a process there to get their feedback and making decisions as we build out both the organisation and its operating model. So with that, I think I'll just pause, hand over to the chair, and then happy to take any questions and can help you navigate through the document, referring as we go. Kia ora. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fletcher's got a question.
No, I wish to speak. No questions.
Councillor Henderson has a question.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for your work. It's fantastic. Just got a cue around advertising policy because I've since been approached by some concerned residents and groups around our transport assets being used to promote fossil fuels. And so I'm wondering firstly where the policies around advertising will sit as part of that transition. And then I suppose the second question is, if it does come into council, do you foresee that we're going to have a conversation about that in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So you're right, there is a long-term contract in place that sells advertising in bus shelters under very strict conditions, which is controlled by the Auckland Transport policy. And we are currently just working through that at the moment around looking at all the policies that we do need to review as part of this. So we're still working through that.
Thanks, really appreciate that. Thanks, Mayor.
Good question. At a time when we've got sudden increase in costs of diesel, which will put pressure on everything, of course. Councillor Patterson-Hamlin.
Thank you. So, my apologies for not bringing this up in the workshops for a start, but I'm just wanting to ask about disabled people consultation. I'm aware that AT has its own version of this, structurally, internally, because it's quite specific, that form of consultation. At Council, we have the Disability Advisory Panel. So will we continue to have both? I guess my actual question is, which part of the strategy does it come under? Because I couldn't quite figure it out. Is it the program management section of the document, or is it coming under something else? Which bit of this does that fall under?
I think if I'm understanding your question there, we need to go through a process of transferring the functions and the staff structure that supports those functions into council, and then retaining some at the future transport CCO. There will be differences in the way, and not just for engagement, in the way that teams and the frameworks that they adhere to, in the way that they undertake their activity. As the structure becomes clearer, and I noted in my introduction, we'll be consulting with staff soon, we will be able to more clearly identify what needs to change given those future arrangements. So the transition strategy doesn't describe all of those frameworks and the changes that will take place. That's part of the program approach to what we refer to as change management. One of the appendices at the end, if you are looking for a that's testing me. Might be an L. Appendix L has a change management section which focuses on communications, engagement, experience of staff, and talks a little bit to identifying the processes that need to change over time. So I suppose the answer here is we have 6 months. We need to make any changes in terms of integrating the way that council and AT currently do something when they come together under council. We need to make changes during that period so staff are really clear about what's expected of them, what framework they're adhering to, and how they kind of go about their work. So in terms of the section that would apply, I think it's there in Appendix L, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just because the way that that's structured in council is different to how it's structured in AT, so it comes under 2 different categories, which is why I wasn't sure if it was under that partners and stakeholders section or whether it was more under the staff section, because there's a difference there, I suppose, but that is helpful. Thank you.
I think I'd just add, Councillor, that we'll have a look in the final wrap-up of this document and just make sure it's tidy, and rest assured that we'll make sure that that focus within the policy and transport strategy area within the operations area that we're absorbing, and within the PTCCO that it continues to have that visibility.
Good question, thank you. Councillor Filipina, please.
Atamare he mana, good morning, Chair. Atamare e koutou katoa, kai mahi me ngā kai kaunihira to the councillors and staff. Gentlemen, my question is going to be a finance question around the transition. If transport officers need to be, or there's more transport officers need to be employed, where's that responsibility around the employment and the budget? Is that with Auckland Transport or with Auckland Council? Auckland Council. So if there is a requirement for more transport officers, that decision is where? With Auckland Council, with the committee? So please, yeah. So it sits with Auckland Council, not Auckland Transport.
Sorry, Councillor, we think we misheard you. Were you referring to parking officers or transport officers?
I'm talking transport officers.
So currently, obviously, transport officers are employed at AT. The function is proposed to stay with AT inside the public transport focused CCO. So the employment relationship would be through the future transport CCO, but there is an important step where in the legislation the transition director's role is to identify the required roles of both organisations. So the first being what roles are required for council to deliver its new functions, and then what roles are required for the new future transport CCO to deliver its functions.
Toby,
So
sorry
there's
to
a step
interrupt,
in there.
because you originally said that transport officers were going to be with Auckland Council. Currently, they're with Auckland Transport. The hiring of more transport officers, once we've gone through transition, where does that lie, and where does the budget lie, and where does their employment in regards to the mahi they do, where is that decisions, where are those decisions going to lie?
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, we did put you wrong initially, mishearing you. Transport officers, transport focused, public transport focused, transport CCO. Their employment would sit there post-transition. Yes. The budget for the salaried staff sits inside the CCO. Ultimately, those funding arrangements are set through the long-term plan.
Okay, so any funding to get more transport officers, because I've been on this for a while, but that is a discussion through LTP. I just want to get my head around that so I know where to advocate and lobby.
Yes, you would influence that through your decision making in the annual plan and LTP, and probably influence it as well through statement of intent direction to the board.
Kopai, kia ora. And I'll join the queue when ni whakaro, Chair.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Kia ora, thank you. And this is really useful, and I've also really enjoyed the workshops and found them very useful in clarifying my own thinking, but also being able to communicate that and talk that through. I've got a question that I see a significant risk in terms of the change to elected members' workloads. And I wonder if that was something that I didn't see it from a quick look through the risks list. Obviously, that potentially looks different when we're managing the transition to what the future state will be. In my experience, having been elected at amalgamation in 2010 to a local board, was that it did take a number of years to work out what the right level of workload was for local board members in particular, and where things sat, and having the right staff support. So what's sort of the thinking around managing that particular risk around elected member workload and upskilling fast enough to be able to make decisions in a timely fashion?
There are a number of elements related to that. Thank you for the question, Councillor. And they in the transition strategy itself. I might ask you to find me the page if you will, Craig. But at an overview level, yes, the role of elected members is changing, and some of the expectations for effort will be changing. As part of a separate process, the council will support the remuneration authority in considering whether there are, any impacts that kind of trigger something, particularly into the local board space. I see you following along there. From a program perspective, we've kind of got three things in train. So we're trying to think hard about induction for elected members as they come into the role, which will be most notably in the next election cycle, but also trying to think about taking that content and creating packs of guidance material. The team is working really hard to synthesize quite complicated information into what's our current role, what is changing, how will decisions kind of come across the desk of an elected member, what roles and responsibilities look like, some of which has made it into the transition strategy because it's made clear by the legislation. Some of it will progress as the transition period progresses, most notably around which roads, through the road classification framework, which decisions are delegated to staff, which will bring as part of decision making in sort of May, June, I think it is from memory, again in the transition strategy. And finally, it's through the staff support structure, sort of 1, 2, 3. So the staff support structure will go through the proposal, consultation proposal mechanism that I mentioned as kind of will initiate soon, and we'll get feedback from staff about whether that is workable in the new sort of reality of supporting elected members with greater decision making. We'll also include in that at the 1 year review mark for the transition program a check on whether that guidance material, induction material, and staff support model is working, given the volume of decision making. This is sort of another element, may shift and change once constituents are aware that decision makers are changing as well, and also as elected members become more familiar with sort of their powers and decision making. So from a risk approach, we're aware of that change, and we take those steps to support elected members through that.
Thank you. You've preemptively answered my next question, which was about the staff support for elected members and the change, so that's great. I just have one other thing, which is, so on the list of powers, not powers, that's the wrong word, of areas of control, really, which is quite early in the document, under the public transport CCO, it mentions engagement around public transport. There's no comparable list for engagement around other transport issues for the non-CCO part of what comes over to council. And I wondered where consultation is going to sit, because it seems to me that AT has had their own consultation processes, and it may be appropriate for those to sit with the transport CCO when they are very specific to public transport, but then we run up quite quickly against the network optimisation function, which will sit with council. So acknowledging it's probably early days, are there any thoughts yet about how that's going to work? Because I think that's going to be a really important thing for the public. There's a high level of scepticism about AT engagement and consultation. I tend to think that's probably overstated in terms of people's scepticism, but I understand where it comes from. We've got an opportunity here to potentially reset things a bit with the new CCO, with whatever consultation they're doing, but also with any consultation that we will be doing as well. So any sort of thoughts on how that might shake out?
I think you've spotted one of the things that we will check to Phil's comment there about just making sure everything does line up. You spotted that probably by omission we haven't included that there is engagement on the non-public transport functions that would transfer to council, and council has that functional leadership approach where we have a centre of excellence for public engagement, and then we have parts of the organisation that deliver the sort of delivery specific engagement. And you know, I would imagine that in reality, a lot of the engagement that the PTCCO and council may need to undertake on joint projects would need to be kind of led in that fashion. It is calling out in here that some of that on the ground engagement, and if you think particularly in terms of changes to services and AT's model of kind of fronting that with the public and having people there as navigators, that's retained within the public transport CCO. So probably the answer to your question is there's not a great deal of detail to make that work just yet. It almost goes to the question that we had from Councillor Patterson-Hamlin around some of the change management approach through the transition period. Just for completeness, because I can't help myself, the Auckland Regional Transport Committee will make a determination about how it engages with Auckland on the 30-year transport plan. So that's actually a slightly different function to what's happening here, although probably in practice there would be some leaning on council, I would imagine, given our secretariat together with the Ministry of Transport kind of function. So I hope that gives you a level of detail. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hills, please.
Kia ora, thank you. This is really great, and thank you for taking on a lot of our feedback and the Mayor's feedback and kind of covering most things off. 2 questions is just on process at the moment. So a lot of this is around trying to hold things together. My priority is trying to, continuity is key, but I will say that I generally have good responses and communication from AT and on projects investigations. That does seem to be slightly dropping off, and some of the feedback I've heard through the grapevine is that there is starting to become a lack of staff and people able to sign things off. So I just want to know how we're addressing that, because I imagine 6 months from now that might become quite acute. So, you know, had really good service, but I can see the staff that I'm talking to having real trouble getting the information that is usually far easier. So I'm assuming, you know, there'll be a hire freeze or there'll be people deciding to do different things. How are we trying to address that? Maybe it's more for Steve or Phil, I don't know. But I do worry what it looks like by the end of the year.
Thanks, Councillor. I might comment and then ask Steve as well. So this is one of the risks, you know, retaining people through this change process. At a high level, the best antidote to this is to move as quickly as possible and provide as much clarity in order that we don't create the situation where we're going to have, you know, more gaps in staffing, and particularly senior staffing. We have been monitoring that quite carefully. There is sort of certainly a degree of turnover at quite senior levels within Auckland Transport, much less so down below that. There will have to be a level of potentially secondment of people in to cover business critical roles and possibly some contracted in resource. We've just been talking about that as recently as yesterday. So we've got strategies around that. Obviously the aspirations to make sure that the wheels don't come off in terms of business as usual activity, continuation of projects, that we don't lose traction with the capital program and what have you. So all I can say is we're quite wise to that risk and strategising around it with Auckland Transport. It's not as substantial. No, what am I saying? It's not such a big issue at the moment that I think you need to be really concerned about it. But clearly we've got some months to go until things are permanently in place. So it's important we do have strategies around it.
Cool, thank you. It might
I don't know, Steve is sort of located some of the time down in Auckland Transport and very aware of what's happening on the ground there. So Steve.
Yes, thank you, Phil. I think Phil summarised that well, and just to give you some assurance that it is definitely a live risk that's been talked about at the sponsors group for the transition, but also the Auckland Transport Board has this as an item that they discussed frequently to ensure that they have the resources to deliver the outcomes that we're seeking.
Thank you. And it wasn't to try and turn this negative, it was more, are there options to fill with temps or get different delegations, temporary, whatever, just to do as much as we can to be flexible. My other question, and it is more strategy coming in probably long term, but I have discussed this with Healthy Waters leadership and different things around how quickly or over time or through the LTP that the transition, some of those teams will be with Healthy Waters. So I think one of the big success stories maybe out of this will be the linked up approach of all infrastructure. You know, if you think of resilience, the way we do renewals, linking in with Healthy Waters from the beginning. Are we looking at that early so that can kind of mesh together by the end of the year for the LTP? I know that's mentioned in here a little bit, but I would just love to see that kind of work linking in, and I think it'll be a real kind of highlight that it's one. At the moment, it's like drain, catch pit, road, camber, all kind of has different approvals. If that was meshed together within the next year, that would be quite a phenomenal change for Auckland.
Yep. So just to be clear on where we are in the process. So we've signalled the likelihood of those activities coming together within the Auckland Council structure. But there's an important step to go through. There's a change proposal that we're shortly going to communicate the release of in the first week of May. So it's important we go through that process, that we do justice to staff feedback about those changes in the organisation design and the structure and where stuff's located. So, but that is the working thesis, and absolutely I would expect to see a level of integration across those activities once it's in place, and probably starting sooner than it, physically going live at the end of the transition period.
That's great. Thanks so much. Awesome. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There'll be a certain amount of confusion in the public mind about the arrangements, and I think I take note of on the second page of the report, the bill, second bullet point, refocuses Auckland Transport as a public transport focus council controlled organisation. That's great. But I am concerned that constantly in the report and in the verbal presentation, officers keep referring to the transport CCO, the transport CCO. Why not the public transport CCO? Because that is why I think, if we're honest enough about it, why we're having these reforms. Because AT has actually, in essence, failed the public, to be frank. Otherwise, the government wouldn't have touched it. But anyways, that's a point I request officers to start emphasising the public transport focus. The second point, in regard to the status of this new organisation to replace AT was exceptional, and it's been noted in the report, the arrangements are exceptional in regard to local and regional government in New Zealand having a CCO in charge of all transport functions. But the status of AT was also exceptional in that in the Local Government Auckland Amendment Act 2009, it actually embedded, entrenched by legislation. So unlike normal CCOs, literally council-controlled CCOs, AT was not a council-controlled CCO. And I just wonder, under the new Act, will this public transport CCO be genuinely council-controlled, or will it have its own statutory status like AT does? Will it be like a pānuku, which we can fold back into the council if we so desire, or will it be like AT, which will require legislation to make any changes to it?
First of all, I think your point about it being called a public transport CCO is dead right. And I think the document should be changed to reflect that. It is a public transport CCO, and thank you, Councillor Lee, for that.
Thank you, and just...
Do we know what the status is?
Yeah, it's much more like AT than Eki Pānuku, so it would be a statutory CCO with the way the bill is drafted currently.
Okay, so...
I think
okay. Just,
Phil may have more to add to my answer.
another point. I take it that the harbour master function will come back to Auckland Council? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just a final detail, and I guess it may be too early yet, but in terms of putting staff in place, obviously councillors get a lot of complaints about transport matters. When do we start redirecting those complaints, roading related, to the council? Is there a mechanism or a timeline for that public interface to come into operation?
And this in part touches on Councillor Ferry's questions around the support to elected members. So I think the important thing to understand, we're going into a 6-month transition period. The council can elect essentially an effective date whereby all those powers transfer, staff employment arrangements will sort of go live, if you like. The program team is working for technology to be mapped across on that one day, essentially. And it's at that point in time that the powers and responsibilities and therefore complaints resolution processes or pathways to elected members about advocacy and so on, to your point, would sort of become real. But we do need to, and this kind of goes to the change management approach and just kind of careful planning towards the end of the transition period. We can't have that happen as part of one big bang where we haven't kind of tested that and supported, in particular, elected members in their new roles. So towards the end of the transition period, with some of the decisions that are called out as having been made May, June, July, which enable us to kind of build out what those pathways may indeed actually sort of look like, we'll be able to provide support and then perhaps even test some of that, change some of the public-facing material that points people in the right direction and so on. So you should see some changes to the support and explanatory materials tested with you towards the end of the period. And then in terms of that sort of being real, it all kind of goes live at the end of the transition period. Yeah.
That is quite an important function and role and process where elected members sit interfacing with the public with the many and varied complaints about AT, quite often roading related broadly. And so one of the problems with AT, and perhaps one of the reasons why things have happened the way they have, is that the response to complaints is kind of very disembodied, not particularly people-friendly, and so I would hope that the new council organisation department is aware of that and is aware that we need to be a little bit more friendlier rather than having somebody with a one name who may be in the country or not, almost responding by remote control. I just think that's something that we need to work on if we're going to make a measurable difference in the roading area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's the end of questions. And, oh no, Councillor Bartley has a question. My apologies.
Oh, no, thank you. I didn't click the button. I just wanted to ask, so it seems to me like we're going from Auckland Transport, it's coming into Auckland Council, And the issue that we have is we can set the direction as governors, we can set the policy, but where we fall down is the implementation. So how is that being factored? Because a lot of the focus in the transition document is on our decision making and making sure we have the information to make decisions. But in terms of keeping the public on side with us and making sure that we're making the right decisions, it's the implementation that is key. So I think we need to factor in somehow, I don't know if it's more oversight for us as governors, but how are we making sure we're keeping track of implementation?
So if I hear you correctly, you're asking about how we're keeping track of how successful the implementation is of the changes that are being made. So there's currently threefold to that at the moment. One is actually referring to something that Councillor Hills mentioned as well. Through the 6-month transition period, we're going to be setting up some measures and monitoring of how we're maintaining business continuity and service continuity through that period. Then from the effective date of change that Toby referred to, that's when the decision making will be effective, and we'll start measuring and monitoring the benefits that we were seeking of reform as they're outlaid in the plan. And we'll particularly use those from a review perspective at the 1-year review date and the 5-year review date, as well as through our ongoing monitoring processes as an organisation. And that will cover both the functions and services of the PT, Public Transport CCO, and Council in terms of what the transport functions and activities that are moving to Council.
Maybe if I just add one other thing. So I think you're right, Councillor. Focus of today, most of the focus of the document is about getting it done and shifting the powers across and making the change kind of real. And then it's from the end of the transition period, if you like, where the real work begins and the post-implementation can take place, to Craig's point just now. That's why there's a benefit framework in place and a 1- and 5-year review that will be focused on the objectives that councillors have set for us. So, a focused public transport entity that's really delivering well, council taking ownership of its new responsibilities, trying to integrate with land use and transport, because that'll be what's possible in the new model, and then the improved partnership with central government. And then you've got the kind of on-the-ground element of, is delivery still working? Are we measuring our performance? Elected members have oversight over that. And so through mechanisms like our reporting mechanisms to governing body, you would see that ongoing delivery that communities are sort of experiencing on the ground. So I hope that gives you some confidence that, this document is describing our approach to the next 6 months and beyond. It's in that oversight role in that new future state that you're able to do some of what you're asking about, having oversight of that delivery.
Okay, thank you. And because I just keep thinking of the removal of rubbish bins from the parks as an example. We set a strategy, we set a strategic direction, but then when it was implemented, we were all kind of shocked. And then we had constituents contact us to put the bins back, but local boards had oversight. But then we really weren't aware of what was happening. So I hope we learn from that, because it sounds like we're going to go into something like that, but on a much more bigger scale, with a little bit more ambiguity around our roles.
Thank you for that. Righto, now we're going to move to debate, so you guys can retire. Please, thank you for your contribution. And the first debate is from Councillor Philippine and then Councillor Fletcher. Oh, well, we'll go the other way around. I'm quite happy with that. But we have Fletcher and Philippine in the order that they decide. Okay.
Well, we both begin with F, but I would say that this, in speaking to this is far the furthest from an F grade. Anyone who knows me well knows that it has been transport that has really been the driver for my participation in local government. And from the privilege of serving on the board of Auckland Transport between 2010 and 2016, it was abundantly clear to me that the model that we had was holding us back. And so I was one who tried to advocate to Mayor Phil Goff. This reform was necessary to bring a sharp focus into Auckland Transport being the public transport agency with the accountability. And at the beginning of the first term under the Mayor, when Max Hardy was the Chief of Staff, we had an away day where we talked about these things, and this came through very clearly, the articulation on the need for this transport reform. So this is a day that I think we should celebrate. This has been a major impediment in people's expectations about amalgamation, that the monster that Auckland Transport was and all of the complexity around it has held us back. So I today really want to extol the progress that we've made on this, and where it came from Max, and then with the confirmation of Phil Wilson as our CEO. I mean, he really understood this issue, and the careful detail that has gone into this. I'm thrilled to bits with his choice of Steve Mutton as his transition director. I'm really pleased that we have a really good interim board in terms of Auckland Transport. We've got some good people there, and even that decision that they took yesterday for their acting CEO is one that I applaud. So for all of you, and I'm not undermining the complexity of what needs to happen. This is a very detailed piece of work, but I, for one, am really celebrating it. And while the Mayor chose to remove me from all transport leadership at the beginning of this term, I am not going to show petulance here, because I really welcome this. I think that this is something that needs our fulsome support, and I'm really, really pleased with all of the staff who have brought this to the point that it is, and I very rarely give the Mayor accolades, but he picked it up at the beginning of his term, and I genuinely think this is going to really unlock all the opportunities that we've looked for, bring greater clarity in terms of accountability and direction setting for what we do by way of investment into public transport and that ongoing functionality. So for anyone who is nervous about supporting this and can just see problems, yes, there will be problems, and yes, it is complex, but it's absolutely necessary. This was the surgery. If we had a sick patient, we'd be sending them off to hospital, and we'd basically send Auckland Transport off to hospital, and what you're seeing now is going to be the way forward and a much healthier Auckland. So my congratulations to Max, to the Mayor, to Phil Wilson, to Steve Mutton, to Toby, and all of the staff that have worked on this. I really welcome this today, and I implore you to support it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koe he mana. I won't go over what Councillor Fletcher has said. All I'm really going to say is number 32 and 33 of our report, which is Māori Impact Statement. My whakaaro on that is on page 20 of the Transport Transition Plan. I don't normally would read out things that I prepared, and I'm not reading out anything that I prepared, but I want to acknowledge our staff in regards to this transition plan, and also the fact that we're moving forward, and wish to just read 2 paragraphs of page 20 of that transition plan. And it's under Transport Reform and Māori Outcomes. Transport Reform provides an opportunity to strengthen how the council group can give effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi and deliver Māori outcomes through a more integrated, accountable and outcomes-focused system. This transition plan aligns with Tāmaki Order 2025 to 2027, Tamaki Ora, the Council's Māori Outcome Strategy and Performance Measurement Framework, which sets the long-term direction for how the Council Group works with Māori and delivers outcomes across Tāmaki Makaurau. When this issue around law reform and statute, I was inundated with calls from our Māori community, mana whenua, mā waka, and their concerns around what happens around our obligation. I'm pleased to read that in that transition plan, that it actually is going to be an enhanced. So congratulations to the Transport Transition Plan, and congratulations to those that have brought it to this point in regards to the Ngā Mihi. Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Councillor Newman, please.
Your Worship, it's very interesting the way in which the debate has moved on the Auckland transport space. I'm having a quick review of the report that was prepared by the panel that was set up in the Gough era. It was led by Miriam Dean, and I remember that review because I gave my feedback to the panel that I felt that Auckland Transport was the outlier, that to have an unelected road control authority with no political accountability back to the ratepayers of Auckland was just wrong. And I felt a bit Robinson Crusoe at the time because I was about the only one that was saying it. I think others might have been saying it, but I was quite outspoken about this. And I think that some of the recommendations of that panel were just plain wrong. That it was considered that there would be an unsustainable burden on the council if we went down the reform path to bring these functions back within the council, which is patent nonsense. And you've picked this up, you've led this. I don't think that the previous mayor would have agreed with you, but you've led this. You've got a mandate to do this, and I'm pleased that the government is coming on board. I welcome these changes because they are utterly consistent with what happens elsewhere in the country. And I think for anybody who would suggest that we have to have this standalone entity, they are out of step. Aucklanders will welcome this. Thank you.
Well said. Councillor Watson, please.
Yes, thanks, and take on board the comment from the CEO, Phil Wilson, that you're looking for an affirming directive here, so that we're too far down this path. So I think that's good. It's all hands to the pump. I guess just the one thing I would say, just in my customary concern to see that things are recorded fairly in respect of looking bad. I certainly, for one, have appreciated, in the time I've been in council, a lot of the projects that Auckland Transport have brought together. And I think as I travel around Auckland and look in virtually every single ward, there's been some significant advancements, particularly in the public transport space with, with bus terminals, with the rail network, with cycle lanes, with any number of things. There has been a lot has actually been delivered if you reflect on the last 15 years, and much of that often building on what the legacy councils had put in place and the ARC. So I certainly am not one of the people who look upon the reign of Auckland Transport as being one of sort of overwhelming negativity. That's simply not true. Unfortunately, there have been people both at local and national level who have realised that one of the most popular things you can do is to attack Auckland Transport. That you see a spike in the polls is to run them down, and there's been any number of politicians have used that, and that's not really been a fair reflection of what's happened on the ground. As some of the other councillors have said, there have been, I think, some fundamental failings that would have greatly aided their cause in terms of responding in a timely fashion to controversies as they arose. And that has been a cultural thing. It's been something that has probably, done them more damage than anything else. So we're to hope in the great transformation that there is a change to that. But I guess there is a challenge too, because large percentage of people are bought into this new organisation. So in the change that's occurring, there is a real challenge there in an organisation that has been restructured to death to kind of retain the goodwill and motivate people then that are doing essentially the same job, only under the auspices of the council. So I guess, Mr. Chair, when it's all said and done, the proof of the cake and all that will be in what comes out the other end. All the usual glib cliches and kind of jargon won't last for too long unless there's kind of meaningful change on the ground. And as I said, I think, looking in retrospect, that Auckland Transport wasn't served that well in its advice. In the last term of council, we had a complete change of leadership, of boards, of chairs, of everything. You couldn't have had a better opportunity in terms of personnel change, not regime change, but personnel change at the top to affect that the kind of outcomes that you're looking for. So it's to be hoped that this transition, which has been widely supported, as the Mayor has quite correctly remarked, from Aucklanders, will up the game a bit, and that everyone will be the better off for that in the short and long term. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, this is a transformational day for Auckland. You can complain about Auckland Transport, you can talk about it, or you can fix it. And I want to give my words today by way of a thank you to you, because you have delivered a fix for the problem that so many Aucklanders have told us that they have with having an external organisation that is not accountable. CCO, it's almost an oxymoron, wasn't it, when it came to Auckland Transport? So my words today are to say congratulations, we've got there, it is a transition, but we're actually on the way. So the complaints are over, we're doing it, we're fixing Auckland and bringing transport reform, and I think it will be one of the most important things, or one of the major things, that this political term will deliver by way of results. So thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lee.
Yes, I don't want to rain on the parade, but I'm intrigued with the wording in the report, in the document here, that the transition document, why reform is happening. And actually, I could have borrowed this for use in the previous item instead of writing my own stuff, but I'll just skip out the words transport. Reform is happening because the current system has not delivered the outcomes Aucklanders expect. Auckland's size and population give it challenges that are distinct within New Zealand, and the current arrangements have not adequately addressed these challenges. I left out the word transport just to make the point. Obviously, we're talking about AT here, and it's all quite true. Reform aims to address two major weaknesses in the current governance arrangements: a lack of democratic accountability in transport decision-making, with the unelected Auckland Transport Board making most transport decisions across strategy, policy and delivery, a role that is undertaken by locally elected members in other regions. And so what we are saying here is we are going to put an end to all of that. Well, not quite, unfortunately, because in my view, the key role, the key responsibility, and the majority of the budget goes to public transport. and that is where, which is the most visible part of it in the sense when you've got projects like the CRL, electrification and so on. And so the lack of democratic accountability in public transport decision making will go on. So not really 3 cheers from me anyway. That is a problem. We have to be careful about talking up a big game here, over-promising, and given the constraints, under-delivering. I would make that point. Our work is still ahead of us, true, especially, strangely enough, in terms of roading and so on. AT and its contractors do a good job. They're very expensive, but that's the system we live in. In terms of public transport, it's failing. It continues to fail, and therefore, despite we're having yet another CCO which is not controlled, and I believe there'll be no, unlike Auckland Transport, there'll be no democratically elected members allowed to be on the board. That's not actually a great total victory, councillors. I wouldn't be popping the champagne bottles just yet. So therefore, in terms of this reform, it's a half pie, P-I-E, or half PAI reform. Therefore, we still have our work cut out for us, and in terms of the CRL, and in terms of making that a success, which is not a given what we're hearing about the services that AT or the public transport CCO that replaces it have in mind, that is still a challenge ahead. When I was chairman of the Auckland Regional Council, I didn't oppose, and I have to confess that, I didn't oppose the super city reforms. I was mistaken about that, to be honest with you, but I certainly oppose setting up a non-democratic AT organisation, and I still oppose a non-democratic public transport organisation. This doesn't exist anywhere else in the country, and so this is a half a step forward, a half a victory, but be careful about overselling it, because what we are criticising here, a lack of democratic accountability in transport decision making, will certainly apply to the new public transport CCO, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. We're not obviously debating transport reform today because we've debated that. This is the transition. So just want to once again acknowledge the work done here to listen to us and to get it, on its way. I think a lot of us don't realise the amount of work that goes into both sides of the coin and trying to bring it together. I do want to acknowledge, because and she's not here today, but Stacey Vance Putton as new CEO of the new public transport, interim CEO for this organisation, and I think it's our first woman CEO in Auckland Council history. I might be corrected on that, but I think so. She is a phenomenal leader, and I know she will do a great job in this space. You can talk to her about any bus route, any type of bus, any ferry, any service, any route, and she will know what's going on there, why it's going on there, what the delays are, what the patronage is like, and where it needs to be addressed. I find her a very, very, very good person, and I hope she continues into the future in this space. So I feel very safe with her coming on in that leadership role. So thanks to those who chose her. On this process, I think this is also only going to work if we and the local boards jump on board and show the responsibility we have. I think Councillor Watson mentioned the political thing to do is bash AT and you get votes or get support. Well, I've tried my best not to do that. I think that if you want something changed or done, go to the source and try get it fixed. The community are tired, the community are busy, they just want us to fix it and not moan about it. So I hope that what doesn't happen is that instead of blaming AT, we blame the new staff member or the new manager or the new operational division, because I think we're at risk of doing that. A lot of people that have come before us and some that are still elected want power, I think, but don't necessarily want responsibility. So we've got to make sure we take responsibility, and I think that's probably the most exciting thing here is that we will have more responsibility, but it takes all of us to, A, help protect the organisation through, because it is going to be hard, as my question earlier, there is already a bit of dip-off of ability to get outcomes because of staff change, of uncertainty, of transition. So I think we do need to step up and give those officers a break, whether they're within council or within Auckland Transport or the Transition Authority or whatever it's called, because it will be hard. It's going to be unsettling for the next year, maybe 18 months. So we just need to give people a break and try to move forward, because I think the future is exciting, but only if we get behind it, support the process, and also understand how bloody difficult it's going to be for not only the staff members, but the people who work with the Transport Department, or whatever it's called, and the new CCO, but also the public to try and understand it. They will just keep coming to us and local board members and whoever to complain or request or find solutions for the thing, and they won't really care where it sits. They'll just want us to deal with it. So I really like the work that's being done with the transition. I feel safe that a lot of things are being considered, but there'll be many things we all miss until it blows up in our face. So it's up to us to try and contain that and try and get the best outcome without, throwing, without criticising people throughout this, because it is going to be tough. So I think this is good, and thank you, Mayor, for your leadership on this. We can just complain forever, but actually we're doing something about it, and I think it's a good way forward. Thanks.
Thank you for that. You summed it up quite well. We'll have a little bit more options than just sending a text to Mr. Kimpton. Councillor Gillen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief, but I did want to thank you and thank everyone involved in bringing this forward. This is a long time coming. I do believe that the creation of Auckland Transport was a mistake back in 2010, and the reason for that is, and it's borne out, the reason for that is that the role of the expert is not to be making decisions on behalf of the people, but it is to advise the elected members to make the decisions. And so where we have decision making in the hands of non-elected people, that is where we encounter problems from a democratic point of view, where the public butts heads with, in this example, Auckland Transport, and it is something that we need to be looking at across all of our CCOs and rolling them back even more than what we're doing at the moment. I want to give one example with Auckland Transport, and look, I do have to say that over the last few years, particularly under the CEO Dean Kimpton, there has been more listening to local boards. Prior to that, it was a brick wall, but also with the public as well. And just one example near my place is it took 6 years, a petition, multiple resolutions of the local board to finally get about 2 metres of yellow lines at one intersection because there were issues being caused. And that sort of thing is just unacceptable, and that is why the public have been crying out for years for Auckland Transport to be reined in and for that decision making to rightly sit with their elected members. And so what our role is now is to ensure that these changes are bedded in properly, that we don't just rubber stamp all of the policies and the delegations and things as they come over from Auckland Transport, but we actually look at them again and unpick them where need be to ensure that our local boards will actually have the ability to make decisions when the community brings concerns to them, and to make sure that at a regional level the governing body does have the ability to make these decisions, and it's not all just delegated away again and we end up in the same situation. So thank you very much everyone for getting us to this point.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you, Councillor Gillen, for that. Righto, it's been moved and seconded. I'm going to propose that we move this. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary? Carried. Well, I think that's momentous, and I have to say that's a great relief. I've been 3.5 years attempting to make a step like this, and I feel quite good. Don't be scared. Every other council does this. It's just bizarre. Now, we're now after 12. There's another item coming up which is to be held in secrecy. And so I'm going to move us into secrecy and then go to lunch. So you can have a secret lunch. And so those of you who have a sausage roll don't have to tell anybody where it came from. So seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour of going to secrecy, please say aye. To the contrary, carried. Righto. We have a secret lunch now, thank you.